Casey. Welcome to episode 16 of Training, Talk and Truth. Hi Wendy, how are you doing? It's great to have you here on Training, Talk and Truth. I'm very glad you reached out and contacted me. I wanted to give a brief introduction to you, but I found more and more qualifications as I read down through the list, and it was hard to piece together a sentence almost. So this is what I got. I said, Wendi is a holistic nutritionist, a precision wellness specialist, a food supplement developer, and a published author. Yeah. Is that narrowing it down? I know there's a few extras to add on to that, but and you run www.wendymichelle.com.
Yes.
That's perfect. But firstly, welcome to the podcast. This is called Training, Talk and Truth, and I've only started this year, but really, it's just based around. I always had a mantra in my own head to kind of be physically ready, mentally sharp, and spiritually kind of prepared for the world. I thought the three of them things kind of tied in together. So, you know, when you look after yourself physically, it helps your mental health. And really, I think you have to be in the right place spiritually to overall help both of them things as well. Mm-hmm. So that's what the podcast is about. I only started since May, and that's how it got rolling. But so I'm really glad that you came on, because it seems like you have an awful lot of experience from a training standpoint to food industry standpoint, and maybe you could give us a bit of a background of where you're coming from in your experience.
Sure. Congratulations. It's great starting this podcast. I love the concept, which is why I reached out to you, because that is in essence what I do, which is holistic wellness. And people always, the term is used commonly, holistic health, but most people don't really know what that means.
Yeah.
In some cases, they think that means, alternative medicine, which it can, or it means, something kind of woo-woo and, new agey. And it's really just about wholeness. It's about becoming whole. And, there's very significant elements to what wholeness is. So I started out in the fitness, element of holistic health, when I was still in high school.
Yeah.
And I just loved the human body. I thought it was so cool what you can do as far as like aesthetically, but also just, pushing the boundaries and seeing how much, strength or, there's just so much to do with just the body. And I really loved it. Then I got into supplementation, and herbal tonics and different natural remedies, and I thought that was a lot of fun. And then of course that was just like there was an easy into nutrition from there, because they all kind of run along the same lines, right? These herbs and the food. So that was very early on, very early stages. Eventually I ended up competing as a fitness competitor for a little bit, and again, that was really not because I so much desired to be in that industry, but I really was curious what my body could do, and without the goal of competing, I could probably drag that on forever,
Yeah.
So,
but what exactly were you competing in?
It's kind of like bodybuilding, but not bodybuilding. So it's called fitness and figure. So there's a strength component to it, a dance component. So there's some athleticism outside of just posing. So I grew up dancing my whole life, so that was just kind of an easy thing to do, kind of sneak in there.
Nice.
Yeah. So then, I was in that industry for a while, and in my mid-20s, I was in great shape and felt awesome and really no complaints. And then what seemed like and I know better now. But what seemed like out of nowhere came some illness that at first was like, you know, like maybe some discomfort, some bloating, some just stuff that, you know, was not normal for me. And I went to the doctors, and, you know, nobody could really figure it out. So then I applied what I knew about nutrition, adjusted some things in my diet, seemed to help for a minute, but within a couple of months, I went from feeling amazing to not being able to walk, to having seizures, to having a mini stroke. And so I was, you know, I was the picture of health. I mean, I was standing on stage saying, this is healthy. And, and yet I was as far from health as could be, really, in that moment, with no explanation. And so that was, you know, obviously like a pivotal turning point for me, because I realized how much I don't know, and I realized how much there was still to know. And, you know, and I was frightened, because nobody plans to not be able to, you know, walk when they're 20, you know, in their mid-20s. So that was very strange. And because the doctors had no explanation, they couldn't figure out what was going on, it forced me to have to really figure it out myself. So I started researching, and, you know, I learned about literally every condition. I would go to the thrift stores and I would buy used medical textbooks, and I would read about every condition. So you name a specialty, gastroenterology or endocrinology or cardiology, I was reading all of these textbooks and trying to apply that knowledge to what was going on with me, so that I could, you know, I just really wanted to get on with my life.
Yeah. And what the doctors were prescribing, was that helping at all?
So no, the doctors had no idea what was going on with me. So what they were prescribing was just medication to manage the pain. I couldn't walk because I had neuralgia. So there was like pain in my legs, so I couldn't stand on my legs. But I mean, it was like Oxycontin and Percocet, and I mean, Klonopin for the seizures. So it was managing the symptoms, but I was like, I just don't want symptoms. Like, can we how about we just get rid of the symptoms, you know? And that wasn't their goal to, you know, they're not really in the business of healing. They're in the business of managing conditions. And so I had to take that on myself. So I spent about 2 years or so just researching things from a medical side. And then eventually I ended up in a naturopathic clinic, so natural medicine. And that's where I started learning about homeopathy and traditional Chinese medicine and a whole bunch of other elements of medicine that were not incorporated in the medical textbooks that I was reading. Yeah. So then I became very well-rounded in that regard. And it was really a matter of trying to save my own life than it was to study, to, you know, to do this for a living. Like, that wasn't even on my mind. Yeah. Although I did want to get better pretty badly, because I was concerned that if this was happening to me, this could be happening to a lot of people, especially knowing what I knew. Yeah. So eventually I got better and came out equipped with all of this information that seemed completely unrelated and very sporadic and, you know, and excessive. Like, I had so much information. Yeah. I decided I wanted just to spend my life helping people and helping them to be empowered to take that part of their life back, including, like, because for me, it wasn't just a physical fight. It was an emotional fight. It was a mental fight, you know. It was a spiritual fight. Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. In every sense of the word. So now, having been through it, it was different than having just read books, you know, whereas prior to that, I had read books. And so I'm training people in the gym based on book knowledge. When that stuff happens, you know, it changes everything, including how you relate to other people and how they relate to you. So, you know, from there on, I've really done nothing but take these lessons and incorporate them into a multitude of projects that, that span, everything that we just discussed, all of the holistic elements of.
Yeah, and and that's, I was reading an awful lot on your listening to some interviews you were speaking in, and on your website as well. And it really is like the reason I put truth in the title as well, because you're right in saying that, where you've lived through it, and like you said, you're teaching people on behalf of the books, in the fitness initially, and that's fine, and we can do that. But I think it's why you have so many online coaches and nutritionists competing with each other with diets that works and new fads that come along, and that's not really, you have to talk about what people have gone through and what you've gone through yourself, and that obviously fuels a drive. And I think that, when you talk about the setbacks, like obviously you've gone through it and you've gone right down to the bottom and had to reset and rebuild yourself from there. Mm-hmm. And like I had a lot smaller of, a situation where I had a bad fall in the summer, and I had to get surgery and plates put into my shoulder. But I had a certain fitness routine and a certain diet that I really, like, while I had the time off, I really took a second look at, and I started a kind of strength and conditioning course, and I started intermittent fasting, and I started like actually digging into these things to see, I changed my routine, started incorporating more cardio while keeping the weights and more balanced, and I just felt way better. And I said, at least with this podcast, was only kicking off, and it gave me that time to sit at home. Sometimes I think a lot of things happen for a reason in the times. I know I'm saying that to you when you went through a very bad sickness, so you're saying not everything happens for a reason, but where it brought you, maybe it mightn't have brought you to help so many others, because you can relate to people right down the bottom of the sickness, Sure. And I think that, like, I just kickstarted the podcast, and I had this time now to get a kind of more global reach on it, and then really sit down and fix myself, because there's no point in me talking about fitness and this, that, and the other, and I have a mediocre routine that's kind of working, and that's not much research in it. And that's why it's great to have the likes of yourself coming on, who's lived through these things as well, and it really puts the truth stamp beside the fitness, because it's the real story and where you're coming from. And I think that's great, and because a lot of times you could be buying products or listening to people, you're not really sure what they're talking about or who they are really, So I think that's what makes yours so authentic, So I think that's great. If ever lately, like, I'd say it's tough to come out of completely.
Yeah, I mean, it really was. But when I look back at it, and I have to say, in all honesty, and I certainly wouldn't fabricate this, because when I thought it in the process when I was so sick, I just remember saying, dear God, like, if I know as much as I know, and this is happening to me, this means that there's other people out there who are going through this. And let me get back to a place where I can utilize that these things aren't for nothing, that this, that this really was meant for something. And if not just one thing, I mean, let's figure out all the ways that this is beneficial, to everybody. But it was difficult to come out of, but at the same time, it was, I was so driven by, I think I was frustrated at the amount of information that was available to me at the time, because this was, way before, you had a lot of this information on. There wasn't podcasts. There wasn't even a gluten-free section in the grocery store. So, it was really me against the world. At least it felt that way anyway. Yeah. And, I just was bothered. I was really bothered that we have this multi-billion-dollar industry of supplementation and fitness and diets and these books. And there was nothing in there at the time that helped me. It was all just either trend or fad or propaganda of some sort. And so I really was driven to get better, so that I could be an advocate for others, and I could be a voice that, would be a trustworthy resource, so that I'm not slinging products out there. I mean, I make some of my own products, but even in that, I know that what I do is not necessarily the right fit for everybody. And I'm not offended that that's the case. I love that people are learning to receive the permission to choose for themselves.
Yes, yeah, you can choose what you want to follow and who you enjoy hearing, or like that. And the holistic side of things is something new to me, actually. What is the difference, can you say, in your mind, between a health coach or a nutritionist and a holistic health coach? What does that add?
A lot.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm only familiar with some of the certification programs, and even those are not necessarily regulated. So they're minimal at best, meaning more specialized. And it's interesting because I'm just actually I'm relaunching content right now. I've actually taken some time away from social media intentionally to make sure that what I'm doing is of integrity and is still true to the original goal. But in the process, I realized, people tell me all the time, Wendy, you do too many things. Like it doesn't make sense to people. They won't understand. But I realized that, wholeness is complex and there's so many facets to it. And so wholeness is my specialty. I can't water that down. Yeah. Whereas like a health coach or a nutritionist, they are very specialized. So especially nutrition. They're going to talk a lot about nutrition and potentially some supplementation, but they are not probably going to talk about, sun gazing or, earthing, getting your feet on the ground, or, there's so many different things, or the spiritual component of, of becoming whole, of emotional wellness. What are the triggers that are preventing you from being able to move forward? How do you potentially self-sabotage yourself? There's so many things that become what is holistic that get missed in those more specialized compartments, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think, in a way, do you find from your experience touching on the food industry and from coaching and fitness that this holistic has come because we're still trying to figure out ourselves in terms of, like, one example is the doctors who are supposed to know all about biology and neurology and what chemical balances are in your brain, but they still can't help you out in terms of, your body needs more than just, the chemicals to get right. Is that kind of, that's what it feels like more so, isn't it? That we're still, even though we know everything about the human body, we're still figuring it out in some ways. And there's more methods that seem unconventional or seem to, see, I think there's an older generation there. The sports science is in now, I think, and the likes of these holistic coaching, where we know that much more and we're focused on not just the face value of problem, but the roots of the problem as well. Right. I think that's really, like, when you, like, I don't think they would have thought about 30 years ago that your diet would affect your mood, or your energy levels, or, I think they were just, in Ireland it was a few spuds, and get a stew going and just get out there, and do it. But like, the body needs an awful lot more, and that's to keep it mentally sharp and to keep it in the right place, and I think that, even like you said, the focus, I think it's like a calling almost, like, obviously life can beat you down to the ground, but you turn it around for yourself, find out all that stuff, and then sometimes I think someone has to go through this kind of stuff to actually reach more people. You have to be battered down so far. I don't think it's uncommon, because I read one or two things about holistic coaching, and the same thing again. I'm speaking to a guy who's going to talk to me about how his father had dementia and the medications weren't working, and he knew through movement and exposure of light and diet that they started to reduce them symptoms as well. And this is what was my first introduction. This was only a couple of weeks ago. And then when I was reading up on your stuff as well, I was like, that's, really clicks, really makes sense. And then I looked at the title of my podcast and I realized it's almost along the same lines in a lot of ways. I just don't know the literature that you'd know, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But that's why I think that, it is, like, I looked up some of your products and all, it is great, because you have this Next Health Clinic as well going a few years, don't you? And
So that was actually, that's a company that I helped. I was one of the founding members. So I'm
oh,
actually not connected any longer. But when I first came out to Los Angeles, I met up with a couple of people who had this concept in mind of a center that would speak to these different elements of life, but more from a proactive standpoint, more from I feel good and I want to stay there, versus I don't feel good. How do I fix this? So I was, fortunate enough to be part of the process of developing some of those programs and, the different therapies that were brought on, and they've evolved significantly since. It's just very difficult for me I have to be very selective about where I put my time so that I can do as much as I feel like I need to be doing. And that was very much a full-time, hands-on at all times. But yeah, that clinic is I think is the future of wellness, things like that, where people will go when they feel good and want to know how much better they can feel, instead of waiting until they feel bad and just are praying and hoping to feel as good as they were before.
Yeah.
But that is going to require a mental shift that is going to require education, because right now it seems to me a lot of times that the idea is I'm good, so why worry about that? I'm just going to go 100 miles an hour, and then if that happens, then I'll deal with it then. And that's I don't think that's the healthy approach mentally for that. And we need more people to explain and to quantify why is being proactive about health so important that you should invest your time and money in it now. And that's lacking in our society and our reach right now.
Yeah, because I think right now the big focus is on technology and kind of, the computer sector, and, like all these companies are starting to be able to mass produce things because of how quick orders can be put through with the digital age, and everyone's focusing on that. And we're putting our health kind of second and putting our hours in the office in first. And I have a friend of mine who's a boxer, and he's always telling me, get your exercise done before work. That's first. He's like, worry about everything else after, but make sure you get yourself done. And he was one of the voices in my ear that helped a lot, when I was trying to piece myself back together in a way. But I want to throw a couple of things at you from someone from experience that I mentioned it briefly there, that I've been doing intermittent fasting for the last since the start of September, and I found I feel great with it. I found like straight away, a friend of mine's in the army and he runs a boot camp, and he said, I'm doing 18/6 intermittent fasting. Do you want to do it with me? And we did it. And since then, I've lost so much body fat, while keeping my muscle mass and sleeping better and feeling much more energized, like running like twice the distance and all. So I want to ask you what you thought about intermittent fasting, because obviously on diet things, you often get two handles. The same as the game changers that came out recently. I'm sure you heard plenty about this on Netflix, and I've seen people pulling it apart and people like saying it's great. And I said, right, because I have the forum here, I'm going to do both of these things and I'm not pushing any agenda. I'm genuinely going to say if this works for me or not. Fasting is working great for me, but the strict vegan diet I've been doing for the last month, I'm struggling a bit with, because I feel not as fueled. And I had a couple of vegan triathletes was on last week, and I was trying to get my head around, maybe I'm just not knowledgeable enough to know what to be putting together before a workout. So maybe you could give me your opinion on both of them as diets.
Sure. Okay, so I'll start with intermittent fasting. I'll explain it this way. The human body has been designed in such a way that it is miraculous, and that's an understatement. And when you put it into a position in which it gets to perform the way it was designed, it will always exceed our expectations. The problem with it is that in order for the body to get to perform to the extent at which it was designed, it requires discomfort.
Okay.
It requires like hormesis, which is little bouts of stressors, not this chronic stress that we're in now, and where stress has become derogatory and everybody's like, I'm already too stressed, I can't think about little stresses. But intermittent fasting is putting your body in a position to kind of dig deep and pull up its original resources from evolution, which allowed for so many different pathways to get lit up and be activated and utilized that are never utilized anymore because of our surplus of food and because of our social programming that you have to have breakfast and you have to have. So I love anything that allows the human body to exceed our expectations. I think that it's significant for several reasons. One, it's great for mental awareness. So I utilize it a lot with my clients to help them understand hunger cues and to know the difference between hungry, bored, stressed, emotional, etc. I think it's wonderful for body composition. I think that it is helpful to that for different reasons. And likewise, I could say that under conditions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, intermittent fasting would be a terrible idea, which takes us back to what I do, which is precision wellness. It's about knowing enough way out here to know all the landscape. So I can look at everything from a very broad perspective, but I know enough about all of it that I can zoom in on you and go, based on these things that I know about you, here's what we implement and here's what we don't. And the precision is really the key thing, not the more overarching solutions, we'll call them, like intermittent fasting or a vegan diet. So I love lots of things about intermittent fasting. There are some cases in which it's not recommended. But again, that's what people need if they don't know or they are not sure, they need to find somebody to ask in order to establish, is this going to be good for me or will this be detrimental? Specifically women, our hormones are much more sensitive to those types of ups and downs. And it can actually affect even a female's cycle if not done properly. So that being said, I love it, but I also don't necessarily recommend it for everybody.
For everybody, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
As far as a vegan diet. Okay, so it's take everything I said about intermittent fasting and apply it towards the vegan diet. It's the same. It's the same, meaning that there are benefits. There are also instances in which it's not right for everybody. There are certain conditions that the body cannot heal without certain peptides that come from animals. It falls in those little gray areas of the human body that we're still learning. And we're not really sure why this responds better, when in an iron-rich diet that's coming from red meat. It can't be synthetic. There's something about the composition of the blood and the iron of an animal that's different than synthetic. So it's so important to keep all those things in mind. Now, I work with athletes as well, and I can tell you that majority of them, in my experience, and again, I'm in consideration of all population, my experience is small, so I in no way trying to expand this beyond what is reasonable. The plant-based diets are very difficult for them, very difficult for them, and some people really thrive. But I would say 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 end up back on some, animal. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a lot. I do think what it really boils down to is portioning.
Yeah.
To say, okay, well, I'm going to eat meat like I normally do, which is like 3 times a day,
Yeah.
a half a pound every time. It's either that or it's going to be nothing. I think there's like a big gap in between there where we can figure out like, where do people fit, or like, where do you personally fit? And if maybe it would be okay to have like a burger like once a week.
Yeah.
And you get everything you need from that one thing, but now you're not like vegan. And one of my biggest pet peeves are the like the categories. Like it's like we kind of create like these little like private clubs, they're dietary practices. Choosing what I eat is not a religion.
Yeah.
And I don't have to fight about it. I shouldn't have to explain it. I shouldn't have to fight with anybody about it. I shouldn't have to try to convince anybody about it. It's
but you're saying it's different for different people. Like I just haven't, like I saw this Game Changers and I spoke to some people, and obviously there are athletes who can thrive with it. I tried it, and like that I did go from a complete diet shift while I was training for a certain hill, trying to complete a few hill runs by the end of the year. And then I found myself standing there, and fasting was working grand. I was running 15 to 16 hours into a fast, no problem. But then I found myself on the start line hungry and not fueled. And it's like, maybe I'm just not figuring out the right, food to put together. But like you said, if it's different for some people, does that mean that maybe genetics have a part to play in what your body can break down? Because I know when as a kid, I was diagnosed borderline PKU, and I said, like, stay away from E numbers and things like that. I used to get the, thumb prick to check our levels and stuff like that. And I haven't gone back to the doctor in years. But I think now, like you said, I said I'd do a solid month of it. And I probably will go back to eating meat, but I've incorporated so much more fruit and veg into my time where I am eating in the day, that I will keep that now and lessen, like I've been using almond milk more, or like I've been bringing 4 or 5 pieces of fruit to work and snacking on that, and I'm going to keep all that because I think maybe I was lacking that, and maybe it just helps build moving upwards. But there is some things that I find maybe I'm not, because I don't want to go near the fake meats, or there's something that's too over processed. I wanted to keep it plant based completely and try it and say, like, I put up results on intermittent fasting last week. I said, these are my honest results from my own phone. This is what happened: body fat, muscle mass, time. And then, I put up, in a month's time, I'll come back with the vegan diet or whatever. I don't know yet where I am with that. I'm still going through it. But I wanted to ask you, as someone who you're really in touch with, when you're in the food industry, can I ask you something about the US market? And this is a kind of perception that maybe Irish people have, and maybe other countries possibly. And it's maybe more so about the meat industry. I think I remember, when we start getting American TV over the last maybe 10 years ago, we were starting to see these, these Sweet 21, Sweet 16 things on TV, and MTV shows and reality TV started pouring in. And there was these 20-year-olds who looked like 30 years old, and there was these like 16-year-olds who were like 6'6", and it was like a different race almost, And a lot of people started speculating that it was to do with the growth hormones in the meat industry and the farming industry, I guess. And I'm wondering, was that a false perception? Now, I'm not just saying it happens in the US. Of course, it probably happened everywhere. But is that a case where that is still ongoing, or was it ever really bad like that, or were we just completely wrong?
No, I think that I think that the medical industry here would probably not, would not be like, oh yes, we know that it's about the growth hormone. Because there's a lot of intercorrelation between the food industry and the medical industry, and so anything that's working over here is not going to get talked about over here,
right.
Negatively, right? Because they're partners. So, however, what we do know medically is that females are they're aging much, much faster now. Where like they're in elementary school starting their cycles. And that's the only causation for that anybody can even put their finger on is directly correlated with these growth hormones, these, the antibiotics and the hormones that are, put into our food supply. What is it? Is it act on the pituitary gland? Is it, what is it influencing this or that? I think it's very difficult to be certain because we only have access to so much information about it. But sure. I think that a good portion of everything from aesthetics, what we look like, how quickly we age, and how the population that consumes these types of processed foods or these types of foods with additives in it, like how they actually age and so on. I think that the correlation between that and the food supply is absolutely 100%.
Yeah. Okay. I remember talking to my brother recently. We were kind of tossing out technology in the food industry and the medical industry, and we're talking about how quick technology is speeding up and sports science is increasing and all. And we're kind of imagining, maybe it's not unrealistic, but we're thinking about they're curing certain diseases now, and the food quality is getting a bit better. If there's obviously shit out there. There's always going to be that. And everyone knows what they're eating. Everyone knows what. The minute you finish a McDonald's, you feel bad, and you know why you feel bad because of not to put a name out. Sorry, but there might be a stage where we can figure out what diets help for diseases, and with technology and new medicines, we might get to a stage where, now I'm talking about a few hundred years, that people won't be really passing. Like, this might be the disease era where we might get over a lot of them diseases, and it might be just accidents in old age people are passing from. It's just a hypothesis or, a thought, but that's what it seems like the way it's going. Even if it is slowly going that way, it does seem like, with the holistic coaching and with more medicines being available and things like that, that is where it's shooting for, longevity. And I guess that's what physical fitness is as well. Like, it's the longevity of your life, because you're pumping oxygenated blood all through your organs, and it's keeping you fueled and whatever else. Do you think that's an unrealistic thought?
No, I think that you're right on. I think that we are moving in that direction, and my hope is that it's not hundreds of years. My hope is that, we've progressed. Like, if you look even just since the 1970s, what we've done in that, amount of time. I mean, we've accelerated in science and knowledge and technology. I mean, it's unprecedented, and it just continues to multiply in that same fashion. So I don't think that we're even that far off. I do believe, though, that the challenge isn't going to be whether or not the science or the technology exists. It's going to be what people are willing to do, and what information is shared about what is available, so that it's not just about the haves and the have-nots. But I can only speak for, my experience here. We are a culture of comfort.
Yes.
However we can make anything take less time or less energy, I mean, we'll buy that in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So science will get there, technology will get there, but the only way we're going to outrun disease from food is to get back into our innate creation.
Yeah.
And to do what we were designed to do, which is not to be sitting still and not to find, a health hack like, oh, I can just go in and do 20 minutes on this one particular type of machine, and it's the equivalent of working out all week long, but I only have to do it for 20 minutes once a week. Like, I don't believe that that's going to be the answer, but that's what people want.
Yes, I know what you mean. Cut the corners and not suffer for what it is, And it is about, people are kind of sacrificing their future self for themselves now with the pleasures of food or the comfort of sitting in. And I know, like, that's what we're saying, but, you know, it's a whole work-life balance, but it's work-life exercise balance really more so, I think, because when you want to finish work, I know it's hard to get on a podcast and say to people, get out and do it, you know, after a tough day at the office and it's raining out and you haven't had dinner yet and all. But I guess, like, everyone knows it has to be done, and it doesn't have to be a chore either. Because I think once you do a couple of runs or go to the gym a couple of times, you get that bug, I think, and, you know, the placebo effect goes, and, you know, then you're inviting a friend to do it, or, you know, that's what I always try. And I know a lot of people put up, you know, their personal records and their next personal record and shaving a couple of seconds off this and. But I really would prefer to reach someone who's kind of, you know, sitting on the couch, thinking too heavy to get out and go for that walk, or sitting in the room with the light off and feel as though it's not worth it. But I think that's where the spiritual side comes in as well, because if you know you're worth it to go and do it, you know, then you impact yourself, and you might reflect on your friend who's also sitting in that tough place and sees you coming out of your shell. And I think that's where, like, you know, people like to bury their head in the sand, because everyone knows exercise is better for you. And they know the chemical releases, and they know the weight loss that all comes with it. And when you start enjoying it, then they're just benefits of the exercise. But it's that whole getting up and going for it. And that's why I don't post a lot of videos of myself in the gym or anything like that, because I don't think, you know, that's my journey, and everyone has to have their own specified journey. You know, it's really about motivating people and say, look, this worked for me. Here's the results. Why don't you try it? Like, you're not going to die. You know what I mean? Like, even if you can go out and walk 1 kilometer, well, you might, like, jog half kilometer the next day and feel better about that. Or you might sign up to a gym and get your favorite playlist, and that's how you get through your books, by, you know, or whatever it is, you know. But I do think that the burying the head in the sand thing is not just fitness. It also is the food, and it also is the faith side of things as well. I think, you know, everyone just wants to sit in front of the TV and forget about the outside world, and, you know, kind of recoup into their front room for the day and back to work, and not think about the bigger picture, you know. But when you get outside and you see the full moon, you're doing a jog and you feel great and you feel fresh, you always feel better for it afterwards, you know. And that's the trying to promise you're trying to push to, well, I am anyway, trying to push them.
Sure.
But I do think that, like, I kind of had it coming back to my faith in recent years. Or I wouldn't say I was never atheist, but I was skeptical a couple of years ago, and I kind of went through kind of renewing of faith, which kind of had me, like, I felt there was a calling to do something, and I didn't know what it was, and I remember being in the car saying, I know you're trying to tell me something, but I don't know what it is I'm supposed to do. And I just sat down one day with a pen and pad and made that few minutes just to think about things, which you don't usually do. And I wrote out this podcast idea, and I added the faith side. It was like fitness, food, and faith, I think it was initially. And I said, I think you need that, but that's going to it got hit with a lot of criticism as well from people around me saying, why are you bringing that into it? You know, what's that about? I didn't know what holistic coaching was at the time or anything like that. And I said, well, it seems to tie in, you know, because I feel the same benefits I feel from exercise. I feel that from, you know, saying my prayer at the end of the night, and realizing that there is a greater power, and it has me in the right place and doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I think maybe even the crash, you know, made me, you know, stronger on that end and push forward and give me that drive. I think as well, it seems like your calling as well came from that, you know, your sickness, and then you powered out of it. It's like a drive you get when you start getting this information and feeling how good you feel, that everybody should be doing this, you know. I think, why not? When you have the platforms like online, and you obviously have a lot of projects on the go, so I don't know, who knows how many people you've reached at this stage, really. So I think it is, like, would you have faith in a higher power?
Oh, I truly believe that is the foundation. I truly believe that, you just like you know, alluded to earlier, if you are in your home and you're in a dark space, metaphorically and literally, it's very difficult to eat right. It's very difficult to move, because why?
Yeah.
And it's not until that why becomes clear that everything else falls into place. So to me, faith is foundational. And, and depending on like where you are in the world and what your cultural experience has been and what, I think that we all have an ability to tap into what is, ultimately our purpose and the source of us, the source of our purpose. And I think it does, again, it's another element of health, and that you got to be quiet.
Yeah.
And we are not good at being quiet, because, even like think about, you get in the car, you put on a radio, you get home, you put on the television, you get into a line, you get on your phone. There isn't that moment of introspection where you're like, I wonder, I find myself sometimes in stores looking around and thinking to myself, I wonder if that person knows they have an incredible smile, or I wonder if that person, has been told today that they're cared about and significant and valued.
Yeah.
And so then I'm like that weird person that will say it, because why did that cross my mind? You know what I mean? Like, why is that crossing my mind? But nobody's mad at me for it. Nobody's mad that I, go up to them and be like, I know it's kind of silly, but like, just want you to know that, like, you're significant, and that you hold in this space in the same room as I am is not a mistake. And, you're valuable. And I hope that you know that, and nobody ever is like, don't talk to me like that. You can see that stuff land on people spiritually. You can see, truth is such a powerful thing, because when somebody knows what's authentic, when somebody knows there's truth in what was just said, their brain might try to, rationalize it or block it out based on experiences. But their spirit will be like, yes, that was real. Like, let's take note of that. Like, put that someplace for another time. And so I think faith is foundational. And I think being open to figuring out what that is step one.
Step one, absolutely. Because there is a prejudice against it from, I know there's, like, Ireland is a very old Catholic-based country. And I think it got torn up a bit by that. And the wrongdoings, because Catholicism, like many other religions, is an organized religion that is made, men can breed corruption when they get into organized, things like that. And that's why I thought it was important for me, like, how my faith really got going is by taking a Bible and actually reading, and actually like pulling out and saying, hold on, that's a little bit different, like, that's not quite what we're being taught, And then I realized, maybe I'm, like, I think I started acting out. When you start really viewing something that's true and it's hitting home, you start living that out almost. And I think, like you're saying, that is, truth. And I think that's why, I think, like, I be Christian, and I think that's why that's a double meaning on the end of the word truth there as well. And I think that is, like, really, it hits home with people. But, like, it's hard to say to someone, right, if someone, like, was a mess, say, right, and I know it's not a technical term, but if someone, like, was coming and saying, look, I'm a mess, I'm not doing much running, I'm not eating well, and, it's hard to say, right, okay, we'll go for a walk, and then we'll get a bit of food in, and then, if you have a bit of faith, they might turn to you and say, what? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
But I think it is, like, all important, because it's the meaning thing that you alluded to there. Like, I wonder if that person has heard that they matter today. When people get that sense of meaning, then it's worthwhile to exceed and to progress themselves and to pass that on to the next person. And it's like when you came from your findings about your disease things, you could have took your knowledge from that and said, okay, I'll take my routine and I'll go home with it. But you didn't. You said, well, what about the next person? I don't want them to feel the way I went through, or at least I remember you saying you were infuriated by the lack of knowledge, or the lack of public knowledge about the medicines that could help, the alternatives and the rest. So I think that is, like, all important. And I think, like you're saying, like, the body, to go back to where we're designed, we are purposely designed. Like, everything about us is And and I remember I read a lot of neurology. I really want to know the truth, whether it was good or bad on the faith thing. I dug into it, and I wanted to know. Same with the vegan diet. I was like, well, why do we eat meat? And like, where did it start? And why do different cultures eat different food? And it brought me to the French. Why did they eat such strange things? And it was the Germans who invaded them, and they're poor, and they were eating frogs and everything.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to dig into the bones of it, no matter what way it led me. And I was reading books on evidences and everything like that. But we have neurology as well. I wanted to get into where the conscious was coming from, because that's unexplainable. And why do we make conscious decisions, or why do we think we have intrinsic value or seem designed? And, there's two hemispheres of the brain, they say, and the right is equipped with knowledge that we do understand and logical facts, and the left is for things we don't understand. And they say you need both sides, because everything lines up when you put them together. And I think that's why, the spiritual side matters. And I'm not just focusing on that, because I think it all matters. But sure. It's very rare you have a guest on who kind of who specialises in these 3 fields. I know it's a lot more than 3 fields, but in 3 specific areas.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think that's also why a lot of these, these plant medicines are kind of coming back up as alternative options for PTSD and depression and so on, is because what it does is it actually wakes up pathways between the right and the left brain that don't normally talk to each other.
Yeah.
These plant medicines are allowing them to talk to each other. And so then they, in those experiences, they have, whether it's ayahuasca, which is, something that I know here in, Los Angeles is, I don't go to a coffee shop and not hear somebody talking about ayahuasca.
It's on the high, like, not in Ireland, but here on podcasts and YouTube streams.
Yeah. So, these people are having, I mean, regardless of what they think their faith is or what experience they've had in faith, they're having these spiritual experiences in which they're able to understand and wrap their mind around trauma.
Yes.
To the extent at which they can heal from it. And I think that one thing that's very similar in all of their experiences, and this happens to be my personal belief for sure, is that there's a definitive difference between religion and relationship. And if we'll say, if God is the source of all things, and so you're, reaching out to God and praying to God, is God like a boss, or is God a friend?
Yeah.
And it seems like, well, maybe he's both. I mean, we could go on and on about that, but for me, it was, I was raised Catholic as well. And I remember being very curious at a very young age, trying to figure out, like, I don't really understand the ritual stuff. Like, just tell me about Jesus. You know what I mean? Like, I was just like, I want to, I love people, and I want to, get to know them, and I want to, hang out with them. Where does that come from?
Yeah.
If I'm made in the image of a higher power, and I'm longing to know people at a deeper level, wouldn't that equate to the one I've made in the image of also longs to know people? So then, is this really about doing right versus wrong, or is this about relationship? Is this about being messy in the presence of holiness, and it being okay and actually not surprising at all, and actually just an intentional part of the process? And I think that when people go into these plant medicine experiences, they're coming out with relational feedback. There was entities, or there was a person, or there was somebody, and I think it's necessary, because a lot of people have been very hurt by the church.
Yes.
They have been very hurt by organized religion. And there's a lot of things done in the name of religion that is, just horrendous. And I think it's going to require a different person, an open mind to go, okay, some people can't talk about it from this angle, but where can they talk about it and feel comfortable about it enough to allow for the source
Yeah.
to get from their head to their heart, you know?
Yeah, and you're hitting the nail on the head, and it's really the exact same way I think about it, because and I was only putting this together in my mind because sometimes it takes a bit of thinking to kind of see how to put this down. And a lot of people are lost in their faith, and it is a direct result because it's hard to defend religion, but it's not that hard to defend faith, and it's hard to, like you're saying, the personal connection as well. Like, I don't think I would have heard that calling had I not have had that relationship, that I was open, I was connected to it in a certain way. And a lot of, like, I'm going to give a story I haven't really told before. And a couple of years ago, well, it's about 3 or 4 years ago now, I was kind of skeptical. It's even that recent. Now, I always believed in God, but I never had that relationship. And my girlfriend brought me to Amsterdam, and we were there for a few days. We met these people who were YouTubers, and this guy traveled the world, and he was going out with us and all. One thing led to another, and we took a psychedelic, and I knew straight away something was up, and I was kind of like, it was heavy going, you know. And I got back to the hotel room and had this kind of an experience that was like what I actually believed it was like hell. Like, that's what it felt like. It felt like I was tied up and I was being brought down and couldn't escape it. Wow. And the only way, it went down for hours, the only way I got out of it, and I had no relationship with Christ at the time, but when I turned in the shadows was the figure of Christ. And the more I moved towards it, I pulled out of it, and it was like a split where I was on one side, the good and the bad, and my right side was on fire, and I came out of it. It shook me. It shook me for a long time afterwards. And this is what got me digging into these things. And like, when I studied neurology, I know where you're coming from. You're saying the brain connections and the experiments they've done where people have like positively reshaped their brain, you know, and I often do come across them where it made the connection and they're over certain fears, or they don't, you know, they're hyper motivated now and all these kind of things. And I do think that it was because of that. When I read the Bible, it was all, you don't have to go to church to, you know, have a connection with God sitting in your room. And and I said, well, that's not what it says at all when you go to church. You know, they don't say that to you. And then I started building that personal connection. I think that's the purpose of Jesus, in my view, is that connection between the divine and the people, and it's the stepping stone. And I think that's the purpose of it. And like, that helped me before I even got my fitness right. But that gave me the drive to, right, it's time to do the podcast now. And then the bang, and now it's trying to put yourself back together. And maybe I needed to have the fall before I could redeem myself in certain ways, you know. But I do think like it's all important. And I think that people are a bit lost because some people can't see the difference between what religion was and what faith is. And I think that's kind of what my aim is for that side of the podcast, the truth side, is to say to people, look, these are the evidences, you know, and it's not at all what you think it is. It's not going and mumbling and kneeling down when you're supposed to and not talking to each other, because I think that needs to be renewed or something, you know. I don't think that's connection. No one even speaks, you know, everyone shakes their hand at the sign of peace, but that's it, you know. And I don't think that's the way it's meant to be. You know, it should be, we all have struggles, we all have setbacks, but we're all in it together, you know, and that's what it's really about. And I think that's what your story's about as well, when you think about it. Like, you had your setback, it was more than just a setback, but, you know, you struggled through it, and then you're helping others. And it's the whole, I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson, it's the whole acting out the kind of logos. That's what it's like, you know. I think it's enlightening people in that way. So it is great to talk to someone, because it's hard to, if you discuss that with someone else, it's kind of like, what are you talking about? You know, but that's what you're trying to do. It's like, faith is good to have. You know, it gives you meaning to your life, and it pushes you to look after your wellness and on all aspects. And it's very important for someone so qualified for you to be saying it as well. You know, it just drives it home. But
I think it's something that, had I not had that foundation from my family, you know, in that time where I was struggling, you know, and sick, I've always had a connection with God, but I wasn't really going to church. And so then I had like this guilt, because I was like, well, he's not going to listen to me anyway, because I'm not even going to church. And it was like this whole thing where, you know, it's interesting how that stuff gets in. And I think it's just there's a lot of lies, there's a lot of lies that we believe, that who even knows where they come from, that like, who knows if we've ever heard it, if we made it up as we were, hearing somebody else talk about, who knows? There's just a lot that is not true. And
Yeah.
I think the more people allow themselves to break free from that, because they really have to allow themselves, they have to allow themselves to break free from it. Because, I've coached a lot of people, and there's one or two where, they're like white knuckling their pain. Like they just, it doesn't matter if you have evidence or you don't have evidence. It doesn't matter if you have a phenomenal, like outrageous, miraculous story, or you can show them video proof. If they want to keep that part of their experiences or their life as part of their experiences in their life, they're going to. And I think that one of the best things we can do, you can do through this podcast, I can do through whatever I do, or even just an interaction with people in general, is to just remind them that nothing has to go with them into tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't have to. So if you want it to, no judgment. But at the same time, if you can recognize that that's causing you to be stagnant, if it's preventing you from becoming more, and maybe people don't want to lose weight. Maybe they don't want to live to be 120. Okay, that's fine. But maybe they do want just to not feel like shit today. So that's whatever the motivating factor is, it's whatever. But there are things that we do to ourselves that prevent us from, achieving that next level. And so as soon as they can just go, okay, I'm open to the thought that there's potential for me to actually feel like kind of normal person tomorrow. And that sounds like very like, wow, super motivational. But sometimes that's exactly where people are. And that's like the cry of my heart, is to go where the people are. Meaning in the fitness industry, in the wellness industry, it's all about, hey, here's my list of, I'm an expert. Here's my list of things, do these things, and you can be just like me.
Yeah.
And I am like, oh, you're over there on that side of the street? Okay, I'm coming over, and I'm going to bring my suitcase, and in my suitcase is all of these tools, and I don't know, like maybe you'll want to use some, maybe you won't, but I'm going to bring them to you, and I want you to tell me all about you because you're the expert on you. I'm not. I just happen to have a suitcase full of tools, so tell me about you, tell me what moves you, what aggravates you, all the things. We have to get better at going to where people are and stop being like glorified experts, because
yes,
we're not. I mean, I'm an expert on me, but even that I fall short on. So how dare I think that I can,
and this is
tell
like
somebody else exactly what to do.
Yeah, exactly. This is like the evidence for, we're made in the image of something, because animals all can look the same, lions and monkeys, not like, but we all have individual. We look individual, but we also have individual drivers and spirits that no two people are alike, and it's very strange like that. But like you said, it's good that you're able to that is the important thing, because that's like I'm saying, but the fitness experts who were posting up that time they won 5 years ago over and over again, and and a load of followers and stuff like that. That's not going to motivate the person who can't run a kilometer, or can't get up for work tomorrow, or hasn't got the wherewithal to make a CV and get going. You really, the people at the bottom of the barrel is who you need to be pulling up, I think. And that's what I think. Because the other people, not to dismount any of them, but they're on their way. At least they're not going to be in that dark space. That's tough part. And I think it is like you said as well. They need to turn and face into that. You said maybe they don't want to, and it took me a while to turn and accept that there could be more to me, or it could be more to everything, you know. And it makes me have much more gratitude for everything, you know.
Yeah.
You know, when you get into bed at night, just to take them few moments and say, I'm thankful for who's in the house, like, you know, my son, and I'm thankful for my family, and thank you for my friends, and thank you for just that having the ability to do that run today and to feel good about it, and just taking a minute to realize that, you know, the world doesn't revolve around yourself and your own thoughts, and that's not the big picture. You know, you're in the run, and you can say a prayer for someone who's going through something at the moment, even if they're not, you know, they don't appreciate it, but maybe it might help them. It's definitely not going to hurt them, you know. And I do think that, but like, there is driving factors, and I do think that some people are, you know, made to stand out and pull other people up as well. Because I often was asking people who will come on the podcast, where do you get your drive from? What happened as a little kid and all? But it's not really. It's the experience of life that gives people that drive, really, isn't it? It's going through the downs, and that's what life is. It's just the pull down and the pull back up. But what kind of projects are you working on at the moment then, in that kind of alignment?
So
many.
There are a lot. I have a couple of food brands that I'm working on. I formulate, you know, in the kitchen, just like it's this equivalent of making a recipe, but you know, it only stays there for a minute, and then it gets expanded on, and we scale it up, and then I go into a factory, and then we scale it up from there even greater. And it's a very long, all-consuming, frustrating, painful process. And had I known that it was the way that it was going to be, I don't know that I would have agreed to do it. But the more that I learn about the food industry, the more I realize it's exactly where I need to be. Yeah. There's a lot of things when I'm in a factory and I'm creating a product, and, you know, I'm dealing with the food science part of it. When I'm there, I feel very much like I'm representing the moms and the dads and the husbands and the wives and the parents and the children. Like, when you go to the grocery store and you take something off the shelves, it's somebody already spoke for you, so to speak, right? Somebody already decided, oh, this will be, I mean, we have these two choices, how we make sure that this stays shelf stable. This one costs a little bit less, but it's a little bit more health detrimental. You know, somebody's already spoken. And yeah. I have a great sense of responsibility personally to steward that well, meaning that I take it very seriously when I'm in these factories, knowing that I'm in that position. So those are coming out, and we're launching beginning of the year. And there's like a healthy dip, you know, like a dip that you know, can snack on. There's some frozen entrees there. You know, a lot of it is convenience, because I think it would be awesome if everybody could, you know, grow their own food, but that's not realistic.
Yeah.
So again, it goes back to what I was just saying about I'm a firm believer in going where people are, and where people are is on the run. Yeah, you know, they need convenience, and so let's figure out how to do that. That's affordable, but it's not coming at a cost to their health. And so that's what I focus on. So everything that I do is innovative. I do a lot of all my food is plant-based, not necessarily because I am personally plant-based. It depends on what season I'm in. Like that changes all the time for me. But it's because one, it's fun. It's fun to make shredded chicken out of plants, you know, and not lab. Like, I don't do any lab meat. Personally, I'm not into that. There's too much that we don't know about when you're modifying food in a lab and then growing it when this one cell was supposed to be this and now it's becoming this, like that. There's too much in that I'm just like, I don't want to play there. But there's plants that shred up just like chicken. Like it looks like it tastes like it acts like it, and I don't do anything to it. I just know where to find it. Yeah. So working on that. I also have a book coming out that I'm really excited about called Your Best Diet, and it's really kind of an anti-diet book, but it helps people. The book takes people through what I do one-on-one. Yeah. So it helps them kind of like choose your own adventure book, except for that we're going to go down the path of what is the best diet for you, which I'm hoping will be very helpful to people and at least shed some light on the concept of precision wellness and empower them to live in that. And then, I have another project coming out called Next Generation Athlete that I'm really excited about. And this is more about optimizing the human body. How do you push the limits of the human body, but not to the extent at which you deteriorate it or you sacrifice your future self for your current self, but like, how do you make those things work together in sync? So what you do now not only improves your performance cognitively, physically, etc., but also improves your longevity. And that program is going to be a seminar-based program. There's going to be an online course so people can actually take the course online.
That's very good.
And and then there'll also be like a certifying body so that people can get certified in this and then also teach it or coach it.
Yeah, and that's the whole goal, isn't it? That's the whole reach you have now as well. Like the online, you don't just have to host something in a hall at 7 o'clock a certain night and whoever's there can fit into the room.
Right.
You can just throw it out worldwide almost,
Totally.
And I know as well, like I wanted to ask you actually, because you came into the food industry with a kind of honest approach. Well, not a kind of honest, a very honest approach. Mm-hmm. You must have found clash, like from some mainstream people where they're like, yeah, but to succeed or to preserve it, you need to and I'm sure like you have to walk away from certain people. Did you find much of a clash going into that? I can only imagine. Like,
every day. It never goes away. It never goes away. And I have been discouraged from doing what I do way more, 10 times more than I've been encouraged. One, because people say it's impossible to do. It's an industry that can't be shifted.
Yeah.
And anybody that knows me knows, don't tell me something's impossible, because that's exactly what I'm going to go do. And there is like the pushback, which has been a very interesting journey for me, because when I went into it, it was like, these things don't have to happen and we can do it like this. But then as I started learning more about the food science and realizing convenience comes at a cost, it's just how expensive is that cost going to be?
Yeah.
Metaphorically.
Yeah.
So, if somebody wants to buy something off the shelf that they don't have to, prepare, we do have to keep it safe, and so it's like, do you want citric acid in your food? Is that like ideal? Not necessarily. However, if you want convenience, I have to adjust this pH in order to make this work. So it's, I do find myself a bit in between these two worlds of, let's just use all the chemicals that we can and make it as cheaply as possible. And people who are like, I don't want any chemicals, but I want convenience. I want it fast. I want it organic. I want it, and I don't want to pay very much money, but I want it to be this, and I want it to be this, and I want it to be this. And so it's a constant push and pull for me. Like, I feel like I'm in the middle of this tug of war. But yeah, I'm learning every day that there's some things that I can push, and there's some things that are just scientifically I can't push. And under those circumstances, I tell people, then you might want to just grow your own food.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, like you're saying, the fruit prep is the tough part with dieting, isn't it? When you go from, say, someone who's on an all convenience diet, which is not hard to imagine, and like going into trying to prep food like for every day of the week and how long it takes, and it does eat up an awful lot of time. You can see why people are trying to find the balance. That's what people are looking for. I know personally that's what I'm looking for. Like where something that, like I was visiting the local farmer market because I thought, this is better, than getting something that has bleach or preservatives, and at least it came from the ground yesterday or something like that. Yeah. But like it is tough. I can only imagine like what you'd go through trying to push completely one way, and then everyone who's like, look, we're experts in this, we're doing it 30 years, we know what we're talking about in all them ways. But like that's the one thing you actually messaged me saying, when you messaged me first, you said that you'd like to talk to people about how they can shift the food industry in their favor. And I wasn't too sure what you meant by that, really, because it is, it's, you walk into a store and you think they're your choices, just do your best, and especially if you go shopping when you're hungry, that's worst of all, because you're like, I'll eat that, you get everything. But like, are you finding like people are accepting this well? Do they believe in it, that it's going to do well? Like, do they try and stop you?
Not necessarily, but there's not like a lot of support sometimes either. I think when I say I want to share with people how they can shift the food industry, that applies to every industry. I mean, we are, and the generations coming after us are the most powerful, influential generations of all time.
Yeah.
They can reach faster and better and more powerfully than ever before. And to say, well, there's nothing I can do, is truly a cop-out at this point.
Yeah.
Does it require an assembly of people? Yes, it does. Does it require being okay to be a little bit disruptive? Sure. I don't think that this generation really, or the ones, following us, are really too worried about being disruptive, though. Like, it's kind of like in our DNA now, where we're like,
yeah, you're like the hippies again, the 70s. Yeah.
So, I think that we can shift anything, whatever we don't like.
Yeah.
If ever you've caught yourself saying about any one thing, why do we do it like that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's probably worth digging into and then seeing how you can shift in your favor. But the reality is people are buying, that their wallets are their voice. And so if there's 4 products to choose from in the grocery store, and one of them is clearly cleaner, but it's $2 more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, is it worth it to you, or are you going to just continue to complain?
Yeah, that's the thing.
And pay and save the. If you want to save the money, then don't complain.
Yeah.
If you want to complain, and there is a solution, or there's at least people trying, which there's a lot. Oh my gosh, there's so many people who have a heart like I do in the food industry, who want to create solutions. But it's expensive to do because it requires innovation. You have to have different equipment. You have to source differently from around the world.
It's not mass produced.
It's going to cost something.
Yeah.
So there are options out there, and you can kind of force the hand of an industry when you will say, yeah, I'll put my money where my mouth is, and I will spend $5 more for that thing, knowing that if enough people do that collectively, if they find value in those things, that the industry will respond by prices, and then all of a sudden, the larger entities, the larger corporations who make have the bigger impact on the food, it'll force them to have to respond in one way to at least compete, right?
Yeah, or even buy in.
Exactly. So to me, that's how consumers can shift. They can shift, whatever industry it is, but specifically, since the food industry is the one that, I spend the most time in. But, also the medical industry, the supplement industry, we have a lot of say. We have a lot of say right now. And what are you posting? What are you posting on your social media? Are you posting things to help to create those movements, or are you posting things that are trivial and,
And it's true, because while doing the vegan diet, I've been out shopping and finding that it was coming to a bit more on, on the price list, because it's like a niche market almost. Everyone just grabs that one brand or whatever,
Yeah.
But, it is important, though, I think, for people to get the mentality right about it, because they might say, oh, that's a little bit cheaper, that's 50 cent dear or whatever, and but at the end of the day, like, they can go home and spend 40 quid on a takeaway that night and not think twice about it, and that's, it's all about, like, you'll feel shit about that, and you won't sleep well, and you won't be doing anything, you won't be going for a run afterwards. And that's one thing I found with the fasting, you stay light, you stay fresh, and probably with the quality of food increase as well. You genuinely do feel way better, with the less ingredients, with the more. And that's why I want to ask you about the supplements, because this is also a dodgy topic for us. Not dodgy, but some people like it and some people disagree with it completely. But you obviously have a supplement line, and you have a knowledge base in health and nutrition. So can you can you give me a case for why supplements are good or how they can be very beneficial compared to there's a stigma about it a bit, and maybe some more the older generation, but maybe they're right.
So there's a lot of things that because of the soil, because how food is grown, because of environmental toxins, because of the levels at which we're deficient, there are some cases that it's nearly impossible to get everything that we need from food to survive. Yeah, I mean, I think like if like there's nothing except for the land to live off of, can we survive with food? Yes. And sun, and water. There's, more than just food, but supplements are exactly that. They're supposed to be supplemental. They're supposed to help. There should be a purpose. I don't think that anybody needs to have a cabinet full of them just because they read that, if you take fish oil, you don't really remember. You just know somebody said fish oil is good, so you bought it, That in those cases, I'm opposed to supplements, because unless you know why you're doing it, you shouldn't probably be doing it. Okay. And there's not a lot of correlations between the why and the what. So the amount of supplementation, there's like some people, like especially in the longevity side of things, that they're taking 120 capsules, 120 different things per day.
Yeah.
And they can, but in there, they know why. These are people who are very well researched, and they really know I can't just get this alone from my food. And I'm not just trying to survive. I'm trying to thrive. Like I want to be, I want to age backwards. I want to like figure out how to grow my telomeres. Like they're doing like some pretty crazy stuff. And then on the flip side, same, kind of sphere of expert or sphere of industry, you have, people who are like, get first sun in the morning, do sun gazing in the morning, make sure that you get your feet on the ground, make sure you get plenty of DHA and EPA, solid, you're good, and get out, get away from EMFs.
Is that a routine you'd recommend for people?
Oh yeah.
Everybody.
I do. I think we're so connected to the earth in that way. The sun, there's so much cyclical and seasonal stuff that we've become disconnected from, that when you get back in realignment, there's a lot of health benefits to simple things, like, getting up with the sun, seeing the sun. It's turns on all different types of pathways, the body to regulate it for the day, to prime it for the day. It's like priming, anything you would do. It's like if you were going to go do like 100-meter sprint, you wouldn't just show up at the track and run, get on the starting line. You would do a routine of warm-ups, and you're priming yourself to be able to run your best race. Mm-hmm. And getting up with the sun and looking at the sun while it's coming up or whatever. I think that it's like priming.
Yeah.
And water is very important. People don't pay enough attention to their water source.
Really, yeah. Because there's also like a big debate also at this, and maybe I'm optimizing on you being there, but water intake. I drink a lot more water, especially since fasting, because I guess whatever water I was getting from the food, I'm not getting now, and I'm drinking a lot. And I feel great for it, because I think really water benefits you hugely when you actually exercise, especially endurance, distance, or whatever. But a lot of people say then you'll wash away the nutrients and the essential salts in your body. Is that true?
Mm-hmm. It would take a lot of water.
Yeah.
It would take a lot of water. I do think that we have kind of demonized salt for multiple different reasons. Yeah. We don't need to be as scared of salt. The synthetic ionized, with the iodine added to it. But as far as good real salts, I think we need more of that. We need more electrolytes. I think we're very deficient in electrolytes, and so even when whether we do or don't drink enough water, it's more about like the balance of the electrolytes and that we're taking in, goes back to balance. I think the water source is most important, and then making sure that you have all of the necessary key components of health, the different micronutrients from the earth, not synthetic vitamins, but like vitamins from the earth. Even like with gut health and stuff, like soil biotics, like the probiotics that you can get from the earth, from the soil, the dirt that like we used to eat when we were kids, but now we're like sanitizing ourselves everywhere.
Yeah.
That's where it's at, in vitamin and nutrient and so on. So any supplement that's going to go out there and get the dirt out of the ground for you, and be able to like put on a label, hey, this has this many spores in it, well, then that's a supplement that would be great, because you're probably not going to go eat dirt. Yeah,
because I know, like, it's so interesting that like the plants are so full of vitamins. They're so good for us as well. They're not just wildlife, like the soil, like you said, everything around us, the water, the whatever's in them, it's all nourishes the body. And it is all about, I guess what you're saying, the balance of everything. And it's a balance of the exercise, the movement, the light exposure, the faith, like we talked about as well. And I think that's, it'll be interesting seeing the book, and even seeing some of your products as well coming out. I guess you do ship worldwide. Because I don't know, are you in the Irish market?
So we're in the beginning phases of what the distribution looks like. Some of the products are frozen, so it's like a little bit more costly to to distribute that outside of the United States. But some of the more shelf-stable products, that's more likely to be, distributed outside the U.S. markets. But we're kind of still in that space of distribution. So my hope is that it'll be everywhere, and then at the very least that we'll be able to ship it, maybe through Amazon or something. So, but I'll definitely keep all that stuff like as an ongoing conversation. The more that I know, or as I find out things like where and how it can be, obtained, like I will definitely share that with everybody.
Well, as well, like you're saying, but the book coming out, like that's everyone can buy, like the diet stuff and that. So like even that as a guiding tool, like is great, and the seminars coming up. But look, I have to say, thanks very much for coming on. I really appreciate you taking your time. I know you're very, very busy. From it sounds like you're crazy busy, and I know I'm only getting going. But if there's anything I can ever do to, it's something that it's really like a great cause, I think, and. If there's anything I can do by share or whatever, I'm more than happy to do it. And I really hope you do well. I'm definitely going to be following and checking all the products and stuff out myself and posting it up as well. But I really do appreciate it, because I know it's a big time difference and you're very busy working from home. But no, really, thanks very much for coming on.
For sure. Thank you for doing what you're doing. I'm really excited to see how, your audience grows and your reach grows. And likewise, if there's, as you start to, evolve and find, different things that bring value to people, and if there's anything that I can contribute or I can do, like, always consider me a source and reach out anytime.
That's great. I really appreciate that. Thanks very much. Yeah. I'm excited as well to see where it'll go, because, when you get involved in this kind of social media end of things, you don't realize, when I click a podcast, then you see a lot of people in Australia watched it last night, or you got all this breakdown in Finland and Indonesia, and you're like, well, how did they find it? I'm not paying for advertising. Like, what are they searching? And then it grows. So like that's great, and to have someone who's such an expert, that you could, to come on and talk about the balance of everything, because that's really like this episode is really what my whole podcast concept's about, and I'm not that very verbally fluid. So it's great for someone to be able to put it into words for everybody else to hear. But,
amazing. Yeah, definitely keep me posted on how things go, and let me know if there's anything I can do.
That's great. I really appreciate that. Thanks very much, Wendi, for that.
Yeah,
I hope to talk to you again soon.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.